last but certainly not least, in our, I guess that's the batting spot number 4, the cleanup hitter, is Mr. John Felahi, who's going to talk about real-time categorization. There you go, sir.
Great, thanks, Darrell. So I appreciate everyone sticking in this far. Being at the end is kind of tough, but on the flip side, given my talk and a little bit about the company, and I'll give in a minute, I think it will help, because if I was up first, a lot of the context of what I'll talk about would have been lost. A lot of the topics that are on, been earlier, have been great, and there are solutions and issues that face everyone for years. Just a little background-wise, prior to being a content analyst, I was the head of product at a company called Fast Search and Transfer. So the search inside of Documentum, the search inside of many of the systems out there, the ones that you custom built, I lived through painfully solving a lot of the problems that were here. We were the first people who built topic pages 10 years ago using a product called Unity, the first federated search product. And when I first showed it to a particular publisher, he thought we were crazy. We deployed it. He made the most money in 6 months they'd ever made in the previous 5 years on the way he was delivering content. So, but from my background, the issue has always been what I call the 4th C. So we've heard 3 of them today. The first one is the content. How do we mine the content? Chemists and a lot of players have done a phenomenal job of mining content with known information, right? How do we understand Apple and relate it to the other parts of information about Apple? How do we break up the sentence given we understand the language? The second one, you just heard a lot just from Thomas, is what I call the context. How do we understand the context of the user? Where are they coming from? Where did they log in? What do we know about them before? What did they click on before? How can I use that? What history do they have? So I can propagate the best information given what I believe they've typed in and what I believe I know about the user. The third one is how do I categorize and classify the information so that I can serve it up in the most relevant way, leveraging the other 2 pieces of information. And we saw a lot about taxonomies, ontologies, and all those things. The problem with all 3 of those in our current systems, they are a priori predefined. You cannot do any of the stuff by mining the content to serve up what is the conceptual relationship between the information the user's experience is and what you have. So if you don't have a term related to another term in your systems or your lookup tables, and someone types that in, you will only deliver the limited set of information that you have mapped. I'll give you an example. I'm going to say the word coffee. Isaac, what's the picture in your head when I say coffee? Mary Jo, what's the picture?
I was just thinking Central America, but I don't know.
Okay, very good. What did you think about? Espresso. I thought about a French press, right? Every one of us had a different picture. Most of us probably thought of a cup of coffee. Probably no one thought what Mary Jo did, right? That probably wasn't even related, yet a whole set of experiences about how they grow coffee in South America is so important to that concept that it isn't probably in any of the ontologies or synonym lists. So how do we tackle that problem? So I've been doing this for a while. I went and got acquired by Microsoft. I met a person who is in Microsoft research who had a patent on this thing called latent semantic indexing. The original patent holders of latent semantic indexing is Content Analyst Company. The company was formed about 4 years ago, or actually in 2004, to take the technology and apply it to business cases. So I'll talk a little bit first before I get into the slide. I put it up so you could read it. The technology's been used for about a decade in all of our 3-letter agencies and a few offshore agencies. Because it goes through the information and actually takes and builds a relationship of every term to every other term in all the data it's fed. So what does that mean? It means that humans, it works just like humans do. We take the 5 senses in time, and if I say the word coffee, you probably come up with 6 or 7 things in your head. What this does, it does anywhere between 100 and 300 dimensions to every term and builds a mathematical space so it understands how that term is being related. So inside a company I worked at a long time ago called Sun Microsystems, if you typed in and said MTV in an email, you weren't talking about the channel on TV, you're talking about Mountain View, California. And that was conceptually related to headquarters because that was where the headquarters of the company. Everyone inside the company knew what that term meant. Anyone outside the company had no clue. So what you really are finding is that we need a new way to look and mine the information because of these issues. One, you all know it. Information strategic as long as it's classified. If it's not classified, people don't know where it is, don't know how to get it. You can look even inside your own company to say, if we haven't archived it correctly and we haven't stored it and classified it, I can't even bring it back up to serve my audience, whether it's an internal audience or a paid audience. The issue is that we all know to create a taxonomy is a nightmare. I'll be straightforward. Right? My favorite one is I'm building a class called transportation, next one automotive, subclass sports cars. I put in the word Mustang, right? But then I need 20 not rules. Mustang, not P51, not Mustang Corp, not Mustang, horse, but Mustang horsepower okay. Wouldn't it be better that I could give the system 20 example documents and it learns conceptually what the concept of a sports car is or the concept of anything else so that we can classify it and it knows all the other terms that it should relate to versus using dictionaries. Because it's all about findability. I mean, everything that we've talked about so far is we're delivering information to our readership and the readership needs to be able to find it. How quickly can they find it? Then, if we can enrich it with other tools like Themis so that once they find it and they can go read more and link to other associations, that's great. But how do we get through that process? So what we've done is we've basically taken that technology and allowed the systems to use it as a way to look at the content and enrichment. So we're one of many. I heard the term, about natural language processing. If you talk to anybody who has a math background or computer science background, all 4 of these are natural language processing technologies, right? The lexiconic approach, kind of like Themis does, use the language, mine the language, really understand it. Bayesian approach used by this group called Autonomy and a few others. I guess HP wishes they didn't hear that so well. LSIR technology, another one that's pretty interesting. SVM, a machine learning approach. You're getting a copy of these slides, you can read through it. The issue is, one of the things that really is changing in the world is someone asked, a question about language. It was great that you could mine the language. They support 24 languages. The issue for most of us today is language is becoming the biggest issue. So how can you have an underlying engine that's language agnostic, i.e. it doesn't care about the language? And that's one of the benefits of this mathematical approach. We convert everything into a mathematical vector. I don't care if it's Japanese, Chinese. That's why, for example, we're so popular with our friends in the Beltway. They can go take Farsi or Chinese or Japanese or Russian and go search. Mine it, find the conceptual relationships, find the mining. And 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't very popular outside of that marketplace because we were an in-memory solution, so we weren't cheap. Today, everybody's screaming for an in-memory solution because they're looking for performance. We're also the #1 supplier of this approach to the legal community because the issue for all the lawyers, quite honestly, is they are very smart people. They understand the rules and laws, but they are probably not the expert in the area that they're being asked to investigate or mine or research or do a compliance piece at. But they've been given, here are 15 or 20 or maybe 100 documents that are the critical documents. So what they want to do is have the system tell them, just drag and drop and say, take this document and find all the other similar documents, conceptually similar. Might not know the terms, I might not know the other things, and mine it. So we're in about 30 of the top 35 products in that space using this approach. So I wanted to kind of tune it to this audience a little bit, right? And one of the things, I lived in search engines for 20 years. So one of my biggest problems was, how could I apply this? If people know exactly what they're looking for, a traditional Boolean engine, any type of search engine that's out there today is unbelievably great. If I know the terms or if I know the parameters. If you look at Best Buy, for example, one of the first players that went from number 50 to number 1 in the retail space when they flipped to a faceted search model, they went to a zero-term search. 85% after 6 months of the people didn't type a word. They clicked, which were all search-driven applications, right? Most people today on lots of sites that they know that are doing shopping experiences or mining for information, they're not typing. They're going right to the area, sports. Drill down on the Bruins, unfortunately. They lost last night. I'm from Boston, so for people in Chicago, you know, we'll come back. You know, a great thing to me, things like that. But most people, or they know the parameters, right? I know exactly what, I'm looking for a new laptop. It's got to be under 4 pounds or 2 kilos. It's got to be under this price. I want to have this kind of resolution. Let me look at the set and then go read. So how can we augment that when the person doesn't really kind of know the space, knows a few words, and can suggest to them the other terms? Or if they're even mining internal information and they use a code term, which nearly all of us probably could think of at least 23-letter terms that we use every day inside of our company that are never really used outside the company. How can we relate those and mine the information and tag the things in the same way? So we try to look at some of the issues. One of my favorite ones is, you know, someone mentions, you know, Hurricane Sandy. 3 weeks after the hurricane, the media came up with a new term. Anybody know what it was? Superstorm. It was Superstorm Sandy because officially they couldn't call it a hurricane, but there was so much going on. You could do a simple thing to add the word superstorm to your taxonomy to relate it to hurricane and to have documents kind of tagged. But you missed all the things that didn't even mention hurricane, but conceptually were the same as a superstorm. So for one partner, we actually showed them through our systems and example base, they added a new category, superstorm, dragged in 15 documents, everything tagged. So when the people went, to navigate, they clicked on superstorm and found all the appropriate documents. Next one that drives people nuts is I'm reading a neat article on something and we talked about minimal. I don't want to type in a handful of words. I just want to copy this one paragraph and find me anything conceptually related. We're probably the #1 supplier in another market, which is even the worst case scenario, which is patents. Find me any other patent like this. So the key thing is for example, there's a number of patents out there. My favorite one, someone typed in the word motorcycle. They found 700 patents related. They used our system. The top 5 responses never mentioned the word motorcycle. They purposely in patents obfuscate the terms so they can get a broader coverage and try to use words that are more general. We talked about a 2-wheel framed motorized piece. Nothing the word motor or sometimes cycle is in the word. All sorts of things are going on like that. And when we talk about people, my favorite friends in the Beltway, they're dealing with people that purposely use code words and hide things, but they still want to find those related documents. Another opportunity is really dealing with what I call the ability to search in multiple languages. One of the nice things with this, it is an optional search system, so we can actually put things in it and then search against it. So it doesn't care whether you load it up with English or Chinese or French or whatever, it will do that same work. Behind the scenes, we also have the opportunity to do what we call parallel corpora. So you can train the system to learn, here's 1,000 documents in English and here's 1,000 documents in pick whatever language, or series of languages that are exactly the same. And then from then on, the user can just type in whatever they want in their native language and we'll bring up all the other documents. We won't translate them for you, but we'll bring them up. So a couple other things that you might want to look at, though. The technology also does clustering. So it can basically take a pile of information and automatically organize it and tell you what's interesting about that cluster. So you can actually do some things with things that you're learning about from your social media, customer feedback, etc. One example we did for a completely different piece, but I'll give you the example anyhow. For a particular automotive company, they have text in the system that was buried under the user contents. The categories were oil change, 25,000 mile checkup, 50,000 mile checkup. What they found was they had no category for brake failure. When they did the search, they found that brake failure was the #1 problem. Everyone was talking about how their cars were pulling to the right. And it was all buried in the user comments. By using a mining system to look at the text in the, as Dion politely pointed out, someone always asks me, do you deal with structured or unstructured data? I said, there's no such thing as unstructured data. Everything is structured. Every piece of content that is produced has something around it. Whether you typed it in a system or you put it in a database, there is some relationship. How we mine that and look at it is really important. So we have a different way to kind of help you organize and look at the information. And one other thing that's really interesting, I lived with multiple impressions in a lot of the service industry providing information. Hash 5 is a nice thing. I can tell you here's 6 articles from 6 different sources. They're all the same article, just from the different sources. What I couldn't tell you is here's 3 articles that are basically from different sources. 2 words have been changed. We can do that pretty well now today, what we call, a number of companies can, with what we call basically text near-dupe analysis. So we can tell you here's probably a draft or another, or here's 20 versions of this document, and here's the 3 things to look at in these other ones where they've changed from the principal document, or what you call the lead document. The problem with that is in PowerPoints. I don't know about you, but unfortunately I probably create 2 PowerPoint presentations a day. And the only thing I do is change the title on the front to the company I'm talking to, and I reshuffle the order of the PowerPoints. I don't know how many do that. 1, 2, 3, a few. Okay. If you sent that to a text system, a text near-dupe analysis system, it would say those are all different PowerPoints. With a conceptual near-dupe analysis, all of those PowerPoints are conceptually the same. So if you're thinking about how a customer would view that, right, you could present it as one search result with 2 things. 1, here are all the ones that are exactly the same from different sources, and 2, here are all the ones that are basically conceptually the same or textually near the same that people go mine and analyze without trying to figure out looking through the 50 or 60 listings. So some nice ways to kind of re-engage or re-look at the way you can mine information, collect it and organize it, and present it effectively. By looking at the content itself and understanding conceptually how it's worked or how you can categorize it versus a priori having systems predefine those terms. So with the conceptual search and example-based, it's very easy for a subject matter expert, not a data scientist, and I want to keep that separated, because a data scientist to me is a subject matter expert with a lot of skills in the technology. A subject matter expert could be any one of us who's an expert in a particular topic, but not know how to go through and build a taxonomy or do the other things. With this system, you just create the category name, give it the examples that the subject matter expert believes are the right ones, and the system learns from that and applies the tags. So in summary, the real thing that we talk about is all information has value as long as people can find it and classify it. Second, you want to go beyond the traditional methods of predefined relationships to allow the data to help you understand what are relationships or terms that are now being expressed that you should be leveraging in your categorization or in your search experience So it's more findable, hence more money, more relationships, better service to your customers. You want to make sure that it's language agnostic, and there's a number of tools out there that's language agnostic now today that can go allow you to kind of serve up and do this effectively no matter what approach or what country or what business you're going into. Also, we sell only to other software vendors. So we don't sell a platform, we don't sell a solution. And we basically have built something that's a very easy to integrate module. And that's why I'm talking about this next bullet. We're trying to convince people you don't have to start over. We're just an added enhancement to your existing process 9 times out of 10. When we did it with the legal community, every lawyer learned from Westlaw and everybody else how to search with these incredibly crazy Boolean searches. They were the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And they went and they learned all these things and applied them to all the legal systems that they use for review and early case assessment. When we brought in this approach, they flipped out. You mean I can just copy the article and the system will tell me what it is? It took a while to get them over it, but we didn't change it because if they knew they had to look for a specific word or a specific person, having an entity extractor that says, this is John Felahi, go find me everything from John Felahi, and that's been tagged properly, that's great. But when I'm trying to find secondhand smoke and they're using internal abbreviations that no one knows about and no system understands that relationship, they probably missed half the key articles they need to defend themselves with. So what we really need, and one of the things that's going on, and I liked 3 or 4 of the slides earlier where we talked about push, if you really understand what's going on today, in the last 5 years, the customer, which is us, has changed the game so radically on the businesses because of what we've built technically from an infrastructure perspective. 10 years ago, I bet every one of you worked from home at one point and you had a dial-up modem. Today, most of us have a thicker pipe to our house than corporations had to their business 5 years ago. The amount of digital data that the customer is supplying to the marketplace is larger than the amount of digital data that the businesses are supplying back to the consumer. The pipes that we're living on are much larger. How many have a smartphone? How many have a 4G smartphone? Basically everybody. Why? Performance. Why? Bigger pipe. Why? Because you're downloading videos. Why? You're gathering more information. You're navigating. Your smartphone has replaced your desktop. Yet we need to organize the information better so we can serve up the relevant results because we're dealing with a smaller space. So the top results are the most important for the user. And if your site's not serving it up, the next person is. And if you can make it conceptually aware, you've changed the game on your competition and you enrich the way your customer is going to read it. And with that, I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you can get some ideas for other people.
We're going to move to our panel, then we move to our panel. If there's any specific questions for you, we'll jump right on. But
sounds great.
Have a seat. And I'm going to pull up one more chair, so our 5, thank you. Just in time.
Just in time.
Just in time push. Okay, wow. Again, this session really exceeded my expectations. Every presentation was phenomenal. Let's give our speakers a round of applause. However, now that everyone's head is exploding, let me kick off the question by asking, considering what we've seen in regards to Drupal, considering what we've seen in regards to modular architecture, and we've seen the great things that Timus is doing, and Thomas, he first blew my mind with the cat story. That was hilarious. But the content blew me away even more, simply because it talked about really the client understanding their business and for you to understand your client's business. And then, of course, you come in and you hit right into my world in regards to semantic analytics. And I love the joke about autonomy because I was talking about that the other day. You know, where does one get started? I mean, really, you look at someone who has Let's just use an example. There's a company that's been around for quite some time. They have several, like 30 websites, and they're wondering why they're not generating the right type of revenue. They're not making that transition from print to digital. Where do they get started?
Recognizing objects. I think everything comes from there, knowledge about those objects and how users are interacting with them, but it all starts with the ability to say what this thing is.
John, you're about to jump in.
Yeah, I'll tweak a little. I'll go where Isaac was going in the sense of you really need to understand what are your strategic goals and what are your building blocks. And then the one thing that you had that was really telling in your slides, which is where am I today and where do I want to be? And what are the steps along the way that I need to get there? Because if you look at the world how it is today, and I supply a module, we have a framework. The world's changed. You can sit there, you've got to really analyze what do you want to do and how can I quickly and rapidly get to these new frameworks and then leverage what's out there for the modules. It's objects at one level, but if the person doesn't know what their strategic goals are they targeting the customer? Are they targeting profits? Are they targeting things? And then where do I want to be? Then they don't have a workflow. To me, it's the same problem in designing software as is designing your overall, your individual application is designing what are you trying to do for that customer? Are you trying to get them to read it? Are you trying to get them to buy it? Are you trying, and then how can I make that evolution? So
Yeah, to be the technology heretic, I go where the money is. Where's the money? Show me the money. Where's the money coming from? What's my audience historically done? How do we generate revenue? What are my competitors doing in terms of how they're generating revenue? Where do I fit in between? What are my users telling me? It's all about the money. I mean, I know we're all technologists here, but the reality is we serve the financial master. So if we're not doing our jobs and generating revenue, and however you perceive that, in our world, we started with what game are you playing, how do you find winning, and how you're going to get there, because I'm a fat guy from the Midwest that puts everything in football metaphors. So, that it's very simple to look at that way. So when we break it apart and say, the revenue engine is what needs to be served. I mean, that's how you start. And then exactly to John's point, is like that you then peel it apart, what technologies that I'm going to apply to that in order to achieve the financial objective.
But speaking to Brian's point about Drupal and how it allows you to design, I mean, you have a lot of companies that have these legacy systems. How do they get past that to the point where they say, okay, we're going to migrate to this new platform, but the CFO is saying, wait a minute, you're going to, we have a sunk cost of, X amount of millions of dollars. How do they take that decision to change to a new platform, a Drupal platform, if you will?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the days of the big bang, changes are over. People don't have there's too much risk involved, right? For years we looked at project portfolio management. Turns out most projects come in over budget and are delayed and they don't meet their timeline. So start small. Identify skunk works, small projects. Find where your users, where you can impact users in a measurable way, and iterate. I'm a big believer in the lean startup. Apply that to your own business. It doesn't. You can be a big business, small business. You can still apply those same principles: test, measure, iterate. Around there.
I have a question.
Yes.
So many of our members may not admit this, but they might have technology from the 1800s. It's in-house, and they don't know where to start. Their teams may not have the skill sets. They just don't know where to start. So I'm just curious from the panel, from each of you, what is your advice to help the publishers in the audience to get started? What are the 1, 2, and 3 things they should be starting with?
Join SIIA, join ABM, join SIIA, and interact with your peers.
Thank you, I'll pay you later.
No problem.
So to me, one thing that they, again, have to go back and look at is they made that investment in that system for a particular reason. It was either to enrich the content, to deliver the content. What was the core purpose? Okay, so is there something that they've invested in both knowledge and skill-wise that's of value versus the infrastructure, right? Separate out what was the reason why you did it, why you made the investment versus the technology infrastructure issue. And that's the place to make the change. That's the key difference in most people. They think they have to go make the cost change versus and throw out, the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. Most people made that investment because they were trying to solve a very specific issue. It's not mega applications, it's an application targeted audience. So what was the value proposition independent of the environment, the technology?
And Guillaume, what has been your experience with your client base in regards to their investment in semantic tagging and the decisions that they have made versus staying with the Boolean search? Because I was one of the first Dow Jones News Retrieval people in '83, and I never could learn a good Boolean search topic. So.
API, web services, openness. I mean, we always connect to the search engine or to the content management system. Whether it's SmartLogic, it's Documenton, it's moving from a search engine to another one. Sometimes from a commercial approach to a more open source. So I think as far as we are concerned, I mean, the great goal that we keep in mind is we need to deliver the web services and the APIs to make sure that the customers can replace bits and pieces and rebuild the puzzle as they move along. That's key.
Mm-hmm. There's a question from David.
Just, first of all, is that on? Is duct tape and hamsters considered 18th century? I think this has been incredibly powerful. There's a second revolution that's going on that I think affects a lot of the publishers here, and the B2B people probably more, which is there's the content management revolution you all talked about, but there's also the direct marketing to CRM revolution. So we've got two revolutions occurring with equal speed. So I just wondered, and maybe Guillaume first, because we're finding right now, for instance, Salesforce is becoming a central process because we're automating so much more of our workflow, intellectual property into a CRM environment. So maybe just a quick comment about that as a starting place and how that affects all the other things. The two things are going on at once, and we're trying to solve both of them.
Sure. I mean, I think this is the challenge, and I talk about being a digital organization. I think you can define all. What do you do with that information? Well, you need to capture it and constantly find ways that your customers can give you that information, and then that triggers all sorts of processes and workflows. So, there's lots of ways to integrate the systems. I think the technology piece is the easy part when you're thinking about, a visitor to the site, to some sort of conversion and retention of that visitor. It's all the steps in between that you have to go through. I mean, in our business, the conversation we have with sales all the time is, well, we have all these untouched leads. I was at a medical device manufacturer this morning. 1 out of 3 actually got touched. I mean, those are the hard parts, and that's more about people and process than it is with technology. I think connecting the systems is the easy part. I think, and that takes diligence and focus and a commitment to that. If we capture that information, what are we going to do with it? And what are we going to do with it that actually matters to our customers and delivering real value to them?
And David, I love the way you think. The reality is publishers have two assets. Two. We have our users and we have our content. And what lies between is our business, right? So fundamentally, those things can't be separate. So we haven't done a deployment in 5 years that didn't have a full CRM something. I mean, I'm sure Brian can talk the same way. There is no, whether we're using it to manage our advertiser base, which is one set of users that we're very worried about, whether we are using that, and that's usually Salesforce automation. Fulfillment, on the other hand, and you can't swing a dead cat at a trade show without hitting a fulfillment vendor. They are also, sorry, I'm from the Midwest, guys. I just look at things a little different. So I went to public school. So the reality is that the CRM that we deal with now is typically based on fulfillment, and so those are historically fulfillment has meant How do I rack, stack, sort, and palletize my subscriptions and my mailing labels to make it cheaper to send out my publication? Which morphed into, how do I turn that into a better, more efficient emailing list for my ESP, which has now morphed into, show me all of those people and what are the demographics associated. And as I was talking about in my presentation, you have to overlay behaviors, you overlay interactions with your website with those demographics. That's where the power happens. So I'm not sure it's two revolutions, to be honest with you. I think it's the same thing, we're just figuring it out as publishers.
So just one slightly different view. I guess it's more perspective. Looked at this for about 3 years at Microsoft. I'm not saying they have a solution, please. But the real issue, I think, kind of hurt here. And I think about it as the world of the context. And it's not just linking the systems. It's understanding that Mary Jo is in 3 of my different systems. And I need to understand Mary Jo, not the linking of the systems. So that when Mary Jo calls my call center or calls someone about an issue, that I understand she's on the website, she's tried pinging the help thing, she's already logged 3 other problems, and she's bought 6 things.
She's also one of my authors.
And she's, or yeah, whatever else I need to know, right? That's, so you've got the what I call the one value prop that this audience has is, how do I enrich my content so I can make it more findable, more serviceable? So that's one whole stream of business. That's one thing that I think is still extremely important. But then it's, why did you hear about the user, the reader? It's more of, I need to understand the context of the person in my environment. I won't say my end user, but that person, because it might be an internal person just as important. And the problem is we've siloed the information so we could tag and organize the information within each one of our underlying systems. We now have got to raise that up and say, how do I understand Mary Jo across the systems, not in the system?
Robert?
I think you're right on, no. People are interested in things, so that was the reason for that. But for a while, I headed product development for electronic banking at Citibank, and we set up a group called Humanware. And they studied what people wanted and how they wanted to do it, period. There were some people who developed prototypes, but these were people, we videotaped them, we watched their eyes, their hands, their so on. The ATMs at Citibank came from this, the interface, which have lasted for quite a few years, but it's all about understanding. And it's a very good point. It's not the user, it's a person. It's really important, And we had 3 rooms at Citibank. One was a bank lobby. It's actually on 42nd Street. You come into a lobby, go into a bank lobby. One was an office, and one was a kitchen. And we asked people to come in and pay a bill. And what was their reaction? Consumer, B2B, if I'm running a restaurant and the guy comes from the office and the woman walks off the street, if I know what they want, they'll come back, irrespective of whether B2B or whatever. So the key is, I think, a really important distinction that you made.
She's not here, but one of the things that I think, I just want to highlight one other point. We built all these other applications the previous decade, right? Because we wanted to understand for that particular chunk of the business, this person and the metadata, I hate to use that term, but think in that way, around that person, given my focus, marketing, sales, accounting, et cetera. If you flip what MarkLogic's done and think about the new systems that are coming out, right, they don't associate the same way. If you think of take their view of the world from document to person and apply your metadata, all your metadata, start breaking out of the individual silos back to that person, you're then going to solve that viewpoint problem. The problem is we haven't tackled that in a system until we've looked at something like Drupa, some of the other new environments where you can quickly take the modules and go mine the data in 3 or 4 different ways rapidly enough to serve it up in a user interface to the person who's got to have that decision, whether it's the salesperson, the marketing person, the customer support person, the consumer themselves. They even want to know about themselves. I mean, how many people don't even remember what they bought on this site 5 years ago, right? Do I have a warranty? I'm going to the consumer end. I bought this thing and I just broke it. Is it still under warranty? Why should you know and not me?
We have a question back, but before I get to that particular question, I just want to follow that up. What I'm hearing is that maybe our apps passe, because when I remember back in my days at Dow Jones, I would go into a trading room and I had to sell a gentleman a news service in a matter of 30 seconds. If he had to click more than 4 times, I was dead in the water. Now, apps, they do wonderful things. I have 100 on mine. I probably use 2. But the problem is I gotta click on it to activate it. Are you suggesting that apps will go away and we'll get smart and we'll plug this into our interfaces so it does what the individual wants it to do?
I think the term app will change, right? If you think of the user interface for a particular application, will probably be the unique part. The building blocks like Drupal and other things will be behind the scenes. In other words, I want to put the data in this environment that I then can allow a layer of services to act on the data given the viewpoint that I want to take. So before we didn't have the tools of the environment or the capacity to do that. And the world's kind of changed, and this is why I said, when you want to make that revolution, what's the value proposition? The new infrastructures, the new structures that are out there can give you the building blocks. You still have to figure out, how am I going to visualize that for the person absorbing the information? And it's going to be from a different perspective every time, but it's a different kind of view.
I absolutely believe apps will go away. Siri just does stuff. When we have something that just does stuff for us, we won't think about, quote, apps. We'll say, here's what I need, and it will understand me. And if I can do my banking that way or my travel and such, why would I choose 100 apps?
I just want to ask the panel. We talked a lot about users or people, but I wanted to think about process for a second, a little bit separate, in terms of we are processing a lot of primary source material. We're annotating it. We're processing huge volumes, and I'm just curious when we're thinking about things like Drupal or when we're thinking about some of the other, content analyst or even Temis, to what extent are these things used in the content creation process? So the process of handling all this stuff, going through the editing channels, because obviously that's a huge driver of cost, right? So I'm just wondering if you could comment a little bit about that.
Sure, I'll go first. What we're seeing a lot is, and I think you mentioned it. There was, when we first introduced websites, particularly in the publishing industry, we saw a lot of companies just replicate their print production workflows. Well, we'll do that online, and those were, the cost of having a typo on the front page of the newspaper or on a magazine on the rack, really, really high. Turns out that isn't so high in online, and so we've seen a lot of companies sort of rip and replace that with much simpler web-based, web-first systems, if you will. But that doesn't mean they still can't do sophisticated editorial publishing. NBC Universal, all their sites run on Drupal, and actually the front end, the presentation layer isn't on Drupal, it's the editorial publishing piece of it. So it's just for their content creators, their content editors. It depends on the volume of content and the amount you think you can do. I mean, we tell organizations that have very sophisticated or large volume ones, then you should maybe be looking at a document management system, whether it's Alfresco or traditional FileNet or whatever, and just integrate it. Think about presentation layer differently, because that's more of an output rather than the content production piece of it. Depends on your business process.
Guillaume, from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think you can, for the semantic arrangement itself, you have some processes in the background. So you need to add metadata when you ingest typically the content from the primary sources to your internal workflow. So there is some enrichment here. And then some features are directly driven from the website. Because you know that if the reader is reading this specific article, then you want to populate a more like this, or you should be interested in this type of feature. You can maybe highlight things in the article. You can have a specific ad targeted to the content. So this is really the web portal side of the enrichment. And this is a direct call to an index or to something similar to an index to provide and to populate those facets. So a bit of both.
But if I understand his question correctly, he's looking, and if I paraphrase correctly, you're looking to see what type of analytical tools could be provided to help with the creation of new content?
Yeah, processing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Processing of new content. I don't know if, for example, the content analyst could see your tools being used in the content processing.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so-
Absolutely. The question is he's asking the gentleman from Content Analytics if he can see that their tools are used in the pre-processing of information.
So the answer is yes. It's more of to automate some of the tagging and classification, not the creation, what I call true creation, except that there are some things that we could show how there are articles that are becoming more interesting, and hence you might want to, quote, repurpose earlier work into a combination of new articles. And that's something that I believe that this industry is missing a huge opportunity on, which is what I call, again, I hate to say it, the short front end that's unique to the to the related current topic, and pointing to 4 or 5 key facts that they have in their stored archive from a week, 3 weeks, or 8 weeks ago in a more bulleted form, so that the user can quickly grasp the high-level content, the new thing that's related to something going on. Like, for example, what just happened, right? Bernanke just said, we're going to do this. Well, here's this, and here's what he said 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, in a one-liner or two-liner with a link back to the original article. That, to me, is, in a sense, if you're looking for a new mode, that's the way the new, I hate to say it, people, my son just graduated from law school. I can't get him to read an article more than 3 paragraphs long because his mind is burned out from law school. But when he goes on the web, it's like, look at this, link to that, link to that. So if you're talking about content creation from how to repurpose content with a new view given a hot article, I think there's some really interesting things can happen. I don't know if I can help, but there's a lot of other systems that can help.
Jerry?
So first of all, this has been fabulous content, so congratulations on that. A lot of what I heard, it sounds like it's been about getting the right content up on websites and, in front of users. But one of the themes that was just touched on is how you actually get the content into the user's workflow, because that's how you build really sticky apps. And I'm interested in what platforms or technologies you're seeing that are doing that. For example, in the McGraw Hill construction example that kind of flashed on the screen quickly, I know one of the clever things they do is to be able to get the data about projects that might be interested to somebody in the workflow of the contractor. That workflow may be sitting in their truck with a cup of coffee at 7 in the morning looking at their phone, or maybe putting it into some kind of a bidding system. But that kind of integration is the really sticky stuff. So I'm interested in what you're seeing on the horizon in terms of platforms or maybe common approaches to that.
Yeah, I mean, we really see. I mean, I think Thomas talked a little bit about it in personalization and implicit and explicit personalization, and tying, utilizing behavior to drive the content experience. Now, the person actually has to have some sort of content experience on there. You have to go look at men's shoes for us to show you more things about men's shoes or make recommendations. But I think, we're certainly bullish on the idea of big data for marketing, and it's not really big, it's relatively small, but I think that's going to drive a lot of that contextualization and put it in front of them, and then whether they choose to interact, that's on their own. The My Wellbeing, the Humana portal is driven by that, and it's simple rules. there's certainly plenty of room to get more sophisticated, but that's ultimately the principles. Give me something that you might be relevant to you.
I'm just going to laugh. I was just laughing to myself about the one comment you said about the marketing guys. So just a minor point. Out of Radian 6, there are 127 fields they track. This was 3 years ago. I polled the top 50 customers. You know how many fields that they understood? 4 on average. The guy who used the most of them was 7 fields. So basically, over 90% of the data was mentally lost because there was no way to visualize it. That's the biggest problem we have right now with, quote, big data, is how can I aggregate it so I can visualize it, right? We're losing the variability to help because the data volume that we're collecting is such an extreme, and we don't have the tools, even though we've built the tools, we haven't figured out how to mine the tools in a way that it's a value proposition back to the rest of the company.
Yes, Robert.
I just point to Amazon. When I go there, they know what I might be interested in because they're observing what I'm viewing, what I'm putting in my cart, what I'm buying. I'm not a demographic per se to them. I'm not a group. I am a person, and they're observing my unique behaviors, and they're
And then modifying
marketing
it by
kind
inventory
of disappears
or cost.
in this whole equation because they're showing me what I want.
Well, the problem with that is then when you buy a gift for your niece or nephew or a newborn infant, and then it's, so then do they really know, right? Do they know who I am? And that's, I think, the challenge with relevancy and personalization is you play so many different modes. In Amazon, they do everything. On a construction
If you
publication,
ship it
it's much
to
more
your
narrow.
nephew, they probably know that.
No, they don't.
If you're
How many
handing
baby
it-
toys they keep telling me? I wish they did.
No, but
But I
there
think
are always
They're
outliers.
working on it.
Yeah.
But if they're 80 or 90%, what happened to the marketing department?
But I think to Jerry's question, I've always based this on understanding the value chain of an individual.
Yeah.
If I'm going to improve their productivity, if I'm going to solve a problem, that is how I'm going to get them. I go back to my very simple example, going into my first brokerage room back in 1983 in L.A., pre-bond money brokers, and I walked in there, and the guy says, "You got 30 seconds. Why should I switch off from page 4 to your page, your capital markets report page?" And when I showed him what information we had on the capital markets report, he goes, "Okay, good, turn it on." But if I did not have the information that he needed, it was like, "Okay, have a good day, see you later." Again, in the scientific field and looking at workflows, it's about understanding the research workflow of a researcher, which they can vary quite a bit from researcher to researcher.
What I was partly getting at is, in that world today, information is being consumed by applications on a trading floor, in a hedge fund or whatever, and that is being used to drive decisions and then alert a user. So
Yes.
the information consumer is actually a piece of software, but that's all custom right now. And the question is, does that stuff start to standardize around some platforms that make it easier for the end user to consume information and then process it in their own context and then alert them? And
Right.
that's the next, to me, it's kind of a next generation of
Right.
where it goes. At least
We have one more question, time for one more question.
Sure. What's your one piece of advice for publishers who are adopting all of these technologies to become a publisher who's leveraging platforms and becoming a publishing platform company? What is your advice that they need to be thinking about as they do this?
Thomas?
I'll start. That's easy. Make a budget and stick to it. Dude, you know what? It's so easy to overspend on technology. Do not let the technology tail wag the business or revenue driving dog, period. Because it's so easy to fall prey to your IT guys going, "I gotta have this." No, you don't. So just really focus in on what serves the business and take and actually said it perfectly. Brian was great. So take baby steps. That's
Brian?
it.
I'll take a little bit different spin on the same idea. There's never been a better time to experiment. The cloud has made compute resources cheaper than ever before. Open source technology has made software cheaper than ever before. Get in and do it. and try and experiment. The barrier to failure, or the cost of failure, is minimal, almost zero, and it's only going to get cheaper.
Guillaume?
I would say think content, data, metadata. You can get it wrong. You can do some experiments. You can evolve. So I mean, start as early as you can.
All right. Robert?
I think the place to start is by listening to the person who's at the other end, who's chosen to come to your website or whatever. And whatever tools help you do that, I would invest in first. That will then lead you to make the other investments you need to make.
John?
So to me, we're all talking about content and information. And the only reason anyone ever goes to a website is because they need to find something. If they know it, they're not looking. They already know it. The reason why they're going to a website or any of these things or any digital information is because they're trying to find something they don't know or they need to mentally understand. So to me, the word that I always use is findability. It's make your information findable. If it's not findable from that user's perspective, that's why I got into where I'm at now, making it concept aware, right? Then it doesn't exist. It means they're not going to you. So in our world of publishing, we're all about supplying information to someone who's looking for information. If they know it, they're not looking. So, and if it's not findable, then you're out of the game. So think about that perspective of how you're going to make it findable, because if it's not findable, you don't make any money.
Okay. Well, first of all, we want to thank Isaac Sokolik for a very inspiring keynote. Thank you, Simon. Isaac. I want to thank our esteemed panel for great presentations and a great panel. Thank you. And I'm sure Kathy wants to say a few words and thank our sponsor.
Just a couple things. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Darrell, for hosting the day. I'd like to thank the Content Technology Working Group, Peter Marney and Guillaume. We are our co-chairs of that working group. So, and there's others in the room who are part of that working group. So thank you for putting that together. I'd like to thank Content Analysts for sponsoring here today. For those who are in the room, unfortunately online you can't get some of the lovely things that they've brought as parting gifts, white papers and coffee mugs and a number of different things. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I'd just like to thank all of you for being with us here today. We will be sending out a survey to everybody online and here in the room. Please give us feedback, constructive criticism, advice, whatever you think can help you get more out of programs like this, because we are here to serve you, and so we need to hear from you what is going to help you learn and what is going to help your teams learn. So please be very honest with that, and I'll be reading every single response, so I really look forward to those surveys. So thank you on that. We will also be sending out a link to the on-demand version of this, as well as a link to the slides. So give us a day or so to get that all together, but you will be getting another email with that information. You can see upcoming events on your screen. You can go to SIIA.net and go to the events section to see any events that you might be interested in person or online. So with that, I'm going to call it a day. To everybody online, thank you very much. I wish you were here. We have some wine and some food in the back room, so we'll be thinking of you. Until next time, everybody, take care and have a good evening.
Thank you.